birthday vacation, April 25th, Dominican Republic. So I'm excited. Excited about that. Very excited. I'm excited for it.
I'll go really quickly. Hi everyone. My name is Sharif. I'm a pharmacist. I lived in the neighborhood for the last couple of years. I'm also on NEAC as District 4 Commissioner down in South of Maine area. Nice to meet everyone.
Hello, I'm Dr. Harris. I'm tech support. I'm glad that everybody's here tonight. Something I'm looking forward to this spring is getting this technology up and running the way it's supposed to.
Okay, thank you all for sharing. So the purpose of our meeting today, as you may or may not know, the primary election date is on May 9th May 6th, and two of these three candidates will move forward to the November election. So we thought it would be important to invite them here this month to share some of their ideas, their vision, their values in regard to what they have for not just District 7, but the Near East Side specifically. So we wanted to invite them here to not just ask them questions, but to formulate dialogue and have an open conversation. So I'm going to allow them the space to introduce themselves, and while they're doing that, I'm going to pass out some index cards. So if you all have any questions while we are going through the questions that we have prepared for them, you can write them down and then we will collect them at the end. So we have Kate Curry D'Souza, Jesse Vogel, and Tiara Ross, and we'll start with Kate.
So again, my name is Kate Curry D'Souza. How long do we have here?
60 seconds.
Okay, great. So glad to be here. So glad you're here. Part of why I'm here is because we need representation downtown. I'm an independent candidate, and I'm here to represent you. And I'm running independently so that you can have somebody who is not beholden to a party, but beholden to you. I understand that the needs of the Near East Side are not unique actually to the whole city, because many of us are very worried about housing for elders, about being aging in place, the next phases of our zoning code, about being agile with looking for ways for people to be able to move into neighborhoods who want to live here, but also for those who want to stay. And how do we do that and be fiscally responsible? Because things are really different in the environment that we're in. But I'm ready as a leader. I've shown that to you over the number of years that we've lived here. I've been accountable to you in that time frame. And so we have our younger son in public school. We live across from East High School. We have been part of this community for quite a long time. And I think that demonstration of how long I have been in here and been part of you and the work that we're doing here to collaborate and to work together, I'll be able to bring that on city council and bring your voice to the table in a different kind of way. Thank you for having us here tonight.
Hi everyone, so good to be here and thanks for having us and organizing this. My name is Jesse Vogel, and as I said, I'm a candidate for Columbus City Council in this District 7. I'm somebody who's shown up in my community over the years as an organizer and as a lawyer, working for low-income people, trying to assist them in getting what they need to live and thrive in Columbus. During the pandemic, I showed up as an organizer and organized hundreds of my neighbors to show up for neighbors facing eviction and deliver to them some information about their rights as tenants. We created this project that we call the Central Ohio Housing Action Network. That was a grassroots effort up for neighbors. Since then, I've been a lawyer, and I've shown up to represent tenants in eviction court and fighting unfair landlords, as well as now I work as an immigration attorney at CRIS, representing immigrants trying to survive in Trump's America. Now I'm trying to show up for you as your city council member. And I'm trying to do that because I think this is a really challenging time for our country and for our city. I am worried about the fact that we have rising evictions, rising homelessness, rising cost of living. And I think we have an option in this election to swing big at those things that increase inaffordability in our community. That's what I like to do. So that's why I'm running on a platform of more affordable housing that's more deeply affordable, using city resources strategically. I'm running on a platform of increased bus service and zero fare for COTA. We can get there because the fare doesn't make a lot of money for the system, and we can reduce that barrier to ridership, increase ridership, and make it more accessible for all. And we can also get to universal pre-K for our communities, because we need to invest in kids. That's the best investment we can make. So we have a choice, I think, to make this election. I am running as a Democrat, and I'm running as a Democrat because I want to engage people in this process across the city. We're knocking lots and lots of doors with neighbors, getting people excited, because I think that's the only way to fight back against the danger that we have in the White House that is going to continue to put pressure on us here in Columbus, but we can tackle that together.
Great. Good evening, everyone. My name is Tiara Ross, and I am also running for Columbus City Council in District 7. I am a native of the city of Columbus and have very deep roots here in District 7, particularly in the Milo Grogan community, where my grandparents who raised me served as pastors for over 50 years. It really was during that time where I learned about the benefit of benevolence to our community, where I learned about the importance of community service. I always tell folks that I've probably been feeding our unhoused population since I was about 5 years old, because we had that ministry as part of our church. I've been working in a clothing closet since I was a very young child because we had that ministry as a part of our church. I know some of you. I've grown up with some of you because of my deep roots in this district, and I am proud to be able to have the opportunity to serve the community that essentially raised me. I've worked as an assistant city attorney for almost a decade now. It'll be 7 years in about a week and a half that I've been at City Attorney Zach Klein's office, and I've been working to make sure that we're holding landlords accountable so that folks live in safe, sanitary, and quality housing here in the city of Columbus. I also serve as deputy chief of our property action team. So I started as a zone attorney. Now I'm deputy chief of that same unit. We changed the name because the name was counterintuitive to folks. They were like, oh, you're just zoning. You're like, maybe not. But property action, right? We take action against folks who are taking advantage of our residents. I also serve as general counsel for the Inspector General for the police here in the city of Columbus. I think it's very important that while we increase public safety and community safety in our communities, that we're also holding our officers accountable for making sure that they are serving our communities in the way that they should serve them. We have to support them, but support also means accountability as we work together as a community. I'm super excited to serve all of you. I'm excited to get to know the folks that I don't know. I've worked with people, so I know where there's low-hanging fruit. I've been in some of our most violent and most vulnerable neighborhoods. I've spent time with our immigrant community. I've listened to residents about the things that they need. I know where the city has good intent, but it's not necessarily meeting that intent with action, or to taking action immediately. Because we have a long way to go here in the city of Columbus, and we have a lot to catch up to. And we need folks with the experience to be able to get started right away. So I look forward to learning more about all of you, more about the needs of this community, and I look forward to providing creative solutions to meet those needs. It's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you all for having me, and thank you to the Community Engagement Committee of NEAC for hosting this event.
Thank you all for sharing and giving us a little bit about your platforms. So just a few housekeeping. So Chair Harris will be moderating. So Chair Harris will be moderating the panel discussion. So you all will have 2 minutes to answer each question. So we ask that you all are respectful of the time because we want to hear from each of you. And then after that, if the audience has any questions, you all should have received the index card. I'll collect those at the end and we'll review those questions. And yeah, we just ask that you all keep it simple.
You review all the questions and do they all get asked, or what's the process once we all submit our question?
Yeah, so that will be at the discretion of the moderator. So after we collect the questions, I put aside. It just also depends on the time. So we do ask that you keep your questions brief and respectful. So, Chair Harris.
Well, let me formally say good evening, everybody. Oh, I like responses, so this is my house, so good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
I don't know about home training, but this is my house, this is my commission, and so I like good calm response, all right? This is the fun committee, okay? But tonight I'll be moderating this District 7 Columbus City Council discussion. Thank you all so much for accepting the invitation to come tonight. And, you know, we're here to talk about real people and real neighborhoods, real issues, most importantly, real ideas. Because we need things of substance, because that's what's going to allow us to make an informed decision come our May primary and then in November. Because we've seen what has happened by not supporting real substance. And, you know, this is the time in which we can take action. So thank you three for being here this evening. So I want to start off very light. Let me start off very light. So again, 2 minutes to respond. So please share a personal story, not a political one, that has shaped how you care for your community. It could be a life lesson, a challenge you faced, or a moment that changed how you see your neighborhood. Okay? So this is a personal story, not a political one, that has shaped how you care for your community. And let us start with Jesse.
Well, I was just thinking about this recently. As you know, in this campaign world, there's all these questionnaires, like different endorsements and different processes. They're asking people to share questions, and someone asked to share a story. And I was thinking about one, which is the fact that just a couple of years ago, one of my dear friends here in Columbus, he and his partner, who own a small business together, adopted a baby boy, a newborn son. And, you know, I think that over the past 2 years, they've invited me into his life in a way that a friend having a kid, you know, I haven't had that experience before. And it's been really touching to get to be part of watching this little baby grow up and, you know, begin to move and look around the world and see what he sees out the, you know, out the car window and as we're at the park. You know, and I think about kind of like what the future holds for this baby Charlie, who's starting to learn to talk and walk and, you know, do all those things. You know, I think about, you know, wanting to show up and wanting to show up for him, wanting to show up for that family, and wanting to show up to make this city, you know, as strong as it can be, and providing them an opportunity to keep on running their business, keep on growing their business, which is a community space up in Clintonville. It's a dance studio, and also to keep on providing their kid, you know, the chance to grow and live his best life. You know, I want to hold that for them and be here and all of that, and that's part of what makes me want to run for the city council.
Thank you for that. Tier, will you share your response?
Yeah, I was fan. Good to see you. You're high. I think I have a ton. In running for office, Jesse's right. You become very reflective over about your life experiences, and I'm gonna tell a story, and I'm probably gonna get emotional, so bear with me here. One of my best friends passed away in 2020 of HIV/AIDS, and we grew up in the Black church. So maybe you probably have personal experience with this. And I remember him coming out to us when we were just teenagers. And we were keenly aware of the stigma around individuals and their sexual preferences in the Black church, and how sometimes the stigma prevents folks from being comfortable in that space. And I'm just talking from real experience here. And as inclusive as we thought we were being as his friends, and I remember our church started a People Who Care ministry, which is a confidential ministry to support folks that were suffering from HIV/AIDS. And as inclusive as we thought we were being, there were still parts of him that he was uncomfortable sharing. And it led him into dangerous spaces and dangerous environments. It shaped my perspective of service, because I think that as intentional as we try to be, we try to have good intentions about our service to folks. If we are not actually building policy into the fabric of how we operate as a city, then folks are still feeling alone, right? And we could say all day, we want to collaborate and we want to build coalition, but if we're not actually doing the work to make sure that our policies and procedures reflect that, there's still folks that get left behind. And so that is kind of what inspires me and how I look at service to our community.
Kate, could you share a personal story that has shaped how you care for your community?
There's quite a few, but one I think that exemplifies it in a different kind of way is over COVID, and granted we'd already been living here for quite a while, but over COVID, I was an essential worker. I was working a tremendous amount of hours doing the Right to Recover program for the city of Columbus, which was trying to get many people who were gig workers and service workers who did not, they were daily wage folks, right? And they were really struggling about COVID. We didn't want them to go to work. This was a public health effort, but it had an economic piece to it. So through where I worked at the Urban League, we got like millions of dollars out to people, and through individual like $900 and $1,200 payments, it was crazy. But through this work, I was working a tremendous amount of hours, like 100+ hours a week. So I was just like basically getting up to go to bed for like an hour or two, and then getting up for staff meetings the next morning. So, but during this time frame, like we joined a gardening group, right, like the Brownsville Growers group, and I had not really intended on having this growers group turn into anything other than maybe a glorified science project or science thing, a replacement class for our first grader, right? And but it turned into us actually having a garden, which then got us out into the yard. And then sometimes the 6-year-old was like wandering, and you're like, well, where could he possibly be? And so then you find that he's next door with our elder neighbor, and they're sitting on the couch having strawberry carnation milkshakes, and they're like watching Judge Mathis together. So it's like we became like each other's bubble, and they gave each other the community that we really needed at that time, right? Like this was something that was so meaningful, and we're trading hot peppers for microgreens and like face masks for like cheese sticks, and like it was just this really strange time within our community where I was worried that the food pantry in the front off the street was going to be empty, and it was full all the time. And so like there's this space where our community was really so needed, and people were so worried about COVID, and they were worried about the unknowns, and people were really so sick, and yet here we are having this kind of community. And so it just helped me double down in my service here. So.
And thank you, Three, for your response. I felt as though it's important for everyone to understand the man or the woman that is running. You know, what is it that shapes their perception of community, and how did that, whatever experiences have created the person which you see today. Not the political side, but what we all have in commonality, which are just citizens. It's humans, people that should love and respect each other. Now let's get into some policy and things like that. And what we did was we sent out a survey several weeks ago asking you what is it that you would want to raise to the candidates, and what are issues of concern that that you really care about. Those issues are that we'll discuss here. So we're going to discuss housing to start off with. And so the question is, how will you ensure that development within District 7 honors the people already living here while also welcoming new opportunities? And then can you share a vision for housing that's both equitable and sustainable? Okay, I'll read one more time. How will you ensure development here in District 7 honors the people already living here while also welcoming new opportunities? Can you share a vision for housing that's both equitable and sustainable? We'll have Kate, you can start us off.
Sure. We all know, because we've been living, at least here on the Near East Side, but actually across the district, like we actually see 60 to 90 projects in a year, right? That's many more than other areas of the district. But it's also not going to be that way forever, right? Because land is a finite resource. And so thinking through how do we balance what we have here, where we're honoring elders that are living in our neighborhood and making it so that they can continue to age in their homes and finding ways for them to be able to do that safely. We're also giving them opportunities to maybe downsize if they want to, but be able to stay here, right? Many times we've seen where people are having to move somewhere else outside of our community, then they're away from their home church, and they're away from their friends, and they're away from their gardens and things that they've gotten to know. And so I think that part of that is by ensuring that the community is at the table when we're having the development conversations. And that also means that working towards having commissions maybe have a stronger say in how things move forward. When we look at zoning, we have to think about being inclusive. We want to make sure that we're utilizing lots. Are we doing triplexes? Are we doing quads? Are we doing tiny homes? Are we looking at different opportunities to be able to have people have different price points? It can't all be affordable housing with money from federal governments, because we just don't know if that's going to happen. But we don't have to build everything so expensively. My grandmother had 9 children. They lived in a tiny home. There were boys in wall-to-wall bunk beds. People made things happen. And so we can make it where we can have homes that just don't have to be 3,000 square feet. They can do that. And so I think that there's opportunities for us to further explore that. And having it be equitable and sustainable are by having things where they're at different price points. They just don't all have to cost $500,000 to build that. We have to come up with, can we use modular? What would fit with our neighborhood? How do we get people to the table? And then continuing to have sustainable things. Well, there is going to be a level where we can't continue to always build, but can we have the things that we have built be useful for a long time? Our homes, many of them that are already here, are 100+ years old. We want the things that we're building to be sustainable. Can they be greener? Can they have solar? That's going to take some pressure off of people's utility bills. Many times our community, Black and brown folks, have been taken out of the solar conversation, and we need to have that be something that's affordable for people to be able to utilize in the future.
Thank you. We'll just go right down the line, Jesse.
Okay. Well, look, I think we're in a housing crisis. And when I think about how do we support our neighbors in District 7, I think about my block. I live over on 22nd, just south of Maine. And on one side of the block is the First English Lutheran Church that has served all winter as a warming center. That's housing folks who have been living in homelessness. They're trying to get their needs met there. And then on the other end of the block is the Ohio Avenue Elementary School, where kids are coming and going, and staff and teachers are coming and going, and parents are coming and going. And we need affordability for them too. And as well as their grandparents who are dropping them off to school. So this is a big problem, and it's one where we can't lose the forest for the trees. I would be on council prioritizing making sure that we're building more housing. I am supportive of the zone-in initiative, to allow for us to reduce barriers to building. But I also think we need more strategy as a city to make sure the housing we're building makes sense and meets the needs of the people. So if I get elected to council, I'd like to think through a few things. One is, let's develop a Department of Housing and tenant protections that's focused on identifying in the marketplace where is existing housing that's affordable, that's at risk of being lost to an out-of-state investor, and can we use some of the taxpayer voted bond authority dollars that we've raised over the past years and invest that in a targeted way to purchase up housing that's at risk of being flipped and made unaffordable, right? So it's easier to preserve than to build new. I also think we can strategize around the money we're spending and make sure that it's used to build permanently affordable housing whose affordability protections don't expire in 30 years, letting taxpayers left holding the bag.
Thank you. Tiara?
Yeah, so I am a big believer that we need housing across the board. There are probably, I think there are over 50,000 people that are currently paying over 50% of their income in housing. The experts say you should be paying over 30% toward housing. We are so behind in the building of housing in our community that there are going to be some things that we have to do quickly. But we want to make sure that folks that work for our Department of Building and Zoning Services, right, have the appropriate infrastructure in place to make sure that when we're building homes, that they are sustainable, that they are quality, they are using quality materials. I agree that the community should be a part of what this looks like. But I also agree that the longer a deal takes, the more costly it's going to be to complete it. And those costs are largely moved down to the folks that are renting or the folks that have to purchase the home. And so we have to find a way to speed up and make that process more efficient. And I think, Nia, you all have like development priorities, right? And I think that instead of when a zoning variance comes before an area commission, we're just now thinking about our priorities. I think we can work with commissions to make sure that areas have their priorities written down, and those are things that we can think about on the front end, so that when a developer is mid-deal, we're not adding new and additional things to what they need to do. I think that's important. I think equitable housing comes with density. I think we have to peel back the stigma of what density actually means. It doesn't mean ghetto, right? And I think we have a hard time talking about it because some folks don't want more renters in their community, but we need more renters. We need more folks in housing of all kinds. And that's how we move forward toward a more equitable community.
Thank you. Did a little bit of research, just based upon the websites and information that's out there. So I do have some direct questions that I will ask periodically. Kate, you've spoken, and this is on your website, passionately about holding property owners accountable for vacant and abandoned homes. What will be your first steps to implement this, and how would you ensure equity in how these policies are enforced across the neighborhoods of District 7?
Sure. So, we've seen properties that have sat vacant for long periods of time. And when you look at what's on the code violation list, many times those properties just don't show up on that. So when we think about how do we have vacant housing and what does it do for your neighborhood, usually not very much. And it makes people feel unsafe if you're a woman and you're feeling, and we have a lot of elder women who are living next to a vacant home. It feels unsafe when you're not sure if somebody's next door looking through the windows, right? And so we have to kind of think through how do we get those moved along. we've now put into, there is city code, where now we can, have folks come and look at those properties more often, and we can exercise, I think, a little bit better code enforcement on that. But the code enforcement department just isn't really strong enough in and of itself as it stands to really get to as many properties as I think exist in our neighborhoods. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to sort of exercise on that through the city. And we have other pieces of property that have just been owned by churches, nonprofits, that are not also being fully utilized, which doesn't help our community. And so I think that there's an opportunity for partnership to incentivize bringing these things back on board. What does that look like? It could be a fee structure so that after a year of them sitting vacant, and we know that they're vacant because we've actually taken better inventory of what's out there, that there starts to be a gradual fee that starts to build up when you have something just sitting for too long. This isn't something where we're chasing after folks who have a family home that's in probate court. That's not exactly what I'm looking at, but we have properties, and Parkwood is a great example of that had 3 properties that sat for decades vacant. And those weren't helpful for the kids who went to East High School. It doesn't help when visitors come to East High School because it doesn't improve the feeling of the kids who go to that school when you have that many vacant properties. And there were a couple on Long Street too, because we lived next to them. And they weren't tagged because they had the grass mowed enough that they weren't considered vacant. So we have some opportunities there, I think, that we can exercise. This is one small piece of the puzzle. It's not a full zoning solution. It is one small piece. So, yes.
Thank you. All right, there's questions for all of you. Now we're moving on to public safety. How do you see non-policing interventions, such as mental health teams, violence interruption, etc., or prevention, fitting into the public safety strategy within this particular district, or what you'll do if you see it on council? Mr. Ross, we'll start with you.
Sure. So I have had the opportunity to train at our police academy to start programs for our division of police that reintroduce community policing back into the culture of our academies. I'm a big proponent in making sure that our officers have the appropriate tools that they need to serve our community in the way that the community needs to be served. Alternative response is critical and integral in that space. Right now, the Division of Police Chief is requesting for more officers because with the size of the city of Columbus, the amount of officers that we have on the street is not enough. And so you find officers that are burnt out and trying to respond to a ton of calls for service. A lot of those calls for service are nonviolent mental health calls for service, where you don't necessarily need an officer. And oftentimes the officer is not equipped with the appropriate tools to be able to respond appropriately to those incidents. And so alternative crisis response is important. The reality is that our fire department and our police department are probably the only 2 entities that you're going to see 24 hours a day that have the infrastructure to do that. And so we have to right-size our budget to be able to appropriately respond to nonviolent mental health crises. We are not doing that. The hours in which they're operating are not necessarily hours in which we see spikes in crises, right? We're oftentimes going to see that on like 3rd shift overnight, early in the morning. We don't have social workers who probably should be at the forefront, right? They're not working 3rd shift overnight, early in the morning, right? So oftentimes you are caught with just an officer who has to respond to that. Right now, we need to make sure our officers have the appropriate tools to be able to respond. I'm proud to have started Community Immersion that offers appropriate tools to our officers when they are responding. And I think we need to think about bringing the mobile crisis response unit, which is what we have right now, in place before council so we can think about right-sizing that budget to build in the infrastructure that we need.
Thank you. Jessica, Mr. Vogel.
Yes. I think about an experience I had with a client I was representing while working at Legal Aid in Columbus, who came to me with a housing issue, and she was a recent immigrant to the United States, and she had a teenage boy who had gotten in trouble and been stopped by the police and been in a very stressful, dangerous situation with the police. police because he was having a mental health crisis. He was experiencing that stress and experiencing, mental health challenge, and was really scared by that. And, then ended up with a criminal record because of that he had to deal with. And, I'm frustrated by the fact that, so many people in our community, too many people have died and been killed by police in Columbus. And yes, we need safety, and yes, we need to work with officers and hold them accountable and give them the resources they need. And also, we needed to years ago get done a non-police 24-hour emergency response program for mental health crises, because advocates began talking about this years ago. And in 2020, there were protests across the city about police violence and conversations about how we need to get this done. And our city council said, yes, we hear you. Yes, you're right, we do. And now it's 2025 and it hasn't been done. And the reality is that because this issue has been pushed to study after study, and we haven't had leadership in City Hall that's gotten it together to organize how do we have social workers on hand 24 hours a day, which is doable. We've forced advocates who are most impacted by this to take a lot of expense and a lot of time to try to go to the ballot this year to get this done. We shouldn't have let that happen. And I'm standing up, I went with them to the petition gathering kickoff a couple weeks ago, but I'm sad by the fact that it's taken so long to get this done. And if I get elected to city council, I'd want to be accountable to answer these questions sooner than 5 years after the fact when the advocacy began.
Thank you, and Ms. Curry, Sue.
So we come back to the idea of community. Many of us remember that there were more police officers that were available to be able to respond to calls. We saw them out on bikes, we saw them out on foot. I mean, when you talk to John Beard, you talk about how there were police officers out walking the beat that actually talked to business owners, and they were able to work very carefully hand in hand on Main Street. That's important, right? But we've gotten away from that. And I think that when we think about how do we right size our budget, right? When we think about the amount of money that we're paying in overtime and how we have not been able to really recruit younger people to want to come and work for the police who are from here and from the neighborhoods that we would then turn around and have them be serving, I think that that's a key component that's missing. And that we have a piece when we don't have police actually out in our communities, when they're coming to events and they're throwing candy from cars and they're being disrespectful to the neighborhood. That's not how you build community policing. It's not how you build trust in the police. It makes it so they absolutely become the last person you want to call if you can possibly avoid it. And so I think that we need to kind of come up with a better reaction to this, because one, we have to be able to hire people to do jobs that are possible, right? And if we're asking them to work too many overtime hours in any field, medical, warehouse work, that's when accidents happen, and we know that, right? And so we're putting people who are then overtasked and overworked directly into the communities that we're living in with children that are out on the street, and that's when accidents can happen. And so we don't want that. But we also need to be thoughtful about how do we get people more engaged with the police, that there can be healthy dialogue. And I think that there's a lot of room to happen with the immersion program, because we don't want it to be box checking. We want it to be honest. We want it to be actually something where people are actually connecting to the community and it's done in a meaningful way. So it's not just this temporary thing, but it's something long-term and there's a relationship built. You can have a person who had a car accident on a cross street that we see accidents all the time, and the officer's response is, I've never seen that happen before. That would not happen with community policing that actually was happening in a meaningful way. So we can move to change that, and I would be looking at the budget to look so that we can do that.
Thank you for your response. Mr. Ross, you led Columbus's community immersion training program to help police build trust with residents. How would you take that same spirit of cultural accountability into broader public safety policy as a council member?
Okay. How would I take the the same.
The same spirit of this cultural
Yeah,
accountability.
yeah. Yes.
Into broader public safety.
Yes, so community policing is the recognition that if we are servants to our community, that we need to be competent about cultural differences. We need to be competent about differences in folks' socioeconomic background. We need to be competent about differences in folks' experiences with our division of police. Particularly when we are talking about the city of Columbus and how many immigrants are living here right now. I've done a ton of work in the Wedgwood community. It's probably one of the most violent communities that we have had in the city of Columbus by far. And I remember going into the community and talking to our Somali Bantu elders. And I was talking to them about what their experiences has been in Columbus. And I started thinking, like, we as the city call our Somali Bantus new Americans. Some of the elders have been here in the city of Columbus longer than I've been alive. In no way are they new Americans. And they've been here in our community decades, and they're still dealing with the same needs that they had when they got here. And so when you talk about being culturally competent in our policies and making sure we level set that we are a global city and building that in, I talked about inclusivity and building those processes into the way that we do business here in the city of Columbus. That is how I think, what I have used to co-vision and co-found Community Immersion, how we can expand that into our broader policies as a city. We can't just say that we are welcoming to our immigrant communities. We have to actually execute policies and celebrate diversity in such a way that our technology becomes compatible with WhatsApp. That's what our immigrant communities use to communicate. It's not currently, right? And so when you're thinking about that in everything that you do as a city, then you really start building inclusive communities where folks' needs are being met as they should be.
For those who have audience questions, begin to finalize those now, because I got one last question, and we're coming to what has been written. All right, hope you've seen the format so far, okay? The last question, and Jesse, you will kick us off. This question is on community engagement and equity. Couldn't come to a CEC meeting and not talk about community engagement. So how will you make sure, everybody will answer this, okay?
I'm getting ready.
Gotcha. How will you make sure people who don't normally come to council meetings feel seen, heard, and valued in your decision making? And what's one method you use to reach and uplift marginalized voices?
Well, I think we need to be as accessible as possible and as focused as possible on getting big things done for the people of Columbus. I think one thing that I'm excited about, in engaging with, to connect with people with social media. Throughout my campaign, I've been able to connect with people across Instagram and Facebook. We're not yet on TikTok, but maybe this summer you'll see us there. And we're having conversations about the opportunity people have this year to do something different, which is to make a choice and vote in a primary for Columbus City Council. And people are excited to hear about that. They want to understand what the process looks like. And they're messaging me, and they're messaging my campaign. And they're making their own little videos about what they see going on. And so I'd like to carry that into City Council and make sure, on a regular basis, maybe it's once a month we're having, or once a week, we're having a sort of social media fireside chat sit down to talk about what's going on, in City Council that week, what people need to know about, what they can show up for if they want, or what they can tell their friend to show up. I think it's very important to engage with people that way, and I keep on doing that, as well as I think keep on connecting with people in forums like this by knocking doors. And I think the second question was about what are we going to do to uplift marginalized voices, right? So one thing is that there are lots of marginalized voices, lots of people who come from different communities who don't come into this kind of room. And so, that's kind of why I'm excited about the work we're doing, knocking doors in the community, is we're organizing these canvases in different parts of the city, gathering friends at somebody's house, having a cup of coffee or a granola bar, and then going out, and we're knocking on their door and saying, I'm running for city council, what is it that you care most about in this city? And we're taking notes. And we've done this thousands of times already across the city, and we have hundreds of responses. And I'd like to figure out how to keep that up if we're elected to city council. Targeted canvases in different neighborhoods, so we're hearing directly from people in a kind of unfiltered way about what they're most concerned about. And then we can strategize about how we tackle that.
Thank you. Ms. Curry D'Souza, your response.
So I think community engagement is one of those things that if you've already been doing it, then you just keep doing things that you've been doing and you keep building on it. So community engagement for me is something that I've kind of baked into my everyday life. It's how you show up for the band at the concession stand, even if you don't have a kid in the band. It's how you show up for helping with Bethany breakfast or Bethany lunch on Saturdays. It's how you show up in the community, but also just as I told City Council when I went for the interview for the appointment process, my plan is to continue to have an open calendar where people know where I'm going to be, so you'll be able to come to those places. If it means that we're meeting in libraries or we're going to encampments or I'm going to be at different events, then I want you to show up there too and be with me in those spaces, because the intention of this is to be accountable to you. That is why I'm running as an independent. The intention is that I will continue to be accessible to you, because that's how I showed up as a chair of the commission and as a commissioner. That's why I joined the commission in the first place over 7 years ago. The intention is to make sure that there's a plethora of information coming through via email, showing up in civic meetings, showing up in places that not everybody goes to a civic meeting. Not everybody goes to the parent meetings at the schools, but there's other opportunities. We can work with family ambassadors, we can work with other community leaders, and we can be in the spaces where other people hold in their community as being important. And that means being out where people are and not expecting them to show up downtown at a city council meeting. That means also that I'm not expecting them to be at a commission meeting, right? It makes making it so that people have availability, that they're not just talking to me through an aide, that they're actually getting a phone call back from me. And that is my intention as a city council member, is that I will be available. When I joined the commission and I became chair, I put my telephone number and my email address on the website. That will continue to be the way I want to lead as a city leader for city council. So take down my telephone number, 614-403-2225. Call me, text me, ask me questions. I'm here to be accountable to that.
So I agree that we need to be present in our communities, and we can't expect us who are resourced to ask residents to come and see about us. We need to be coming to see about our residents. And oftentimes, and I've said in area commission meetings for the last 7 years of my career, some of you have seen me multiple times at the area commission meetings, and it depends on where you are on whether or not that commission is reflective of the entire community. And I think we have to be realistic. We're gonna have 2 staff members on council. We have to rebuild how city government engages with community from the ground up. Spending 90% of our time at area commissions doesn't always get us the appropriate information that we need about the needs of the broader community. And so instead of doing that, I've been shopping around this idea called tea time. I think don't laugh at me, but what it means is, if you've got a backyard and you want me to come to your backyard and there's a convening there, let's have the conversation. If you are comfortable enough inviting me to your kitchen table, let's have the conversation there. It means being ever present in our communities at all times, not just when we're running, but at all times. Consistently going to places where folks are already gathering, third spaces, our faith-based communities, our apartment complexes. There are thousands of individuals that are living in 400, 500, 200 unit apartment complexes that don't have the ability to get to City Hall, but they're captive audiences. We can talk to them in their place of comfortability. And so I think rebuilding how the city engages with the community from an infrastructure perspective, right? But then also making sure that we are offering ourselves up to come into different spaces so that folks that don't have the opportunity to buy in to government consistently have that opportunity.
Thank you. Mr. Vogel. Okay, it's a question for you. I don't know how to ask this question correctly, but forgive me. You identify as a Jewish resident, okay, as well as queer, okay. How would you bring this lens to policy making in a way that invites a cross-cultural understanding and protects the most vulnerable groups?
Wow, what a good question. Let me think about it. You know, we show up in our spaces with the identities we show up with. So I'm gay, I'm Jewish, you know, my Judaism has been a whole journey for me in my life. My dad's Jewish, my mom's not. And, you know, I've come to love Jewish traditions as a way of building community and of finding support amongst one another, loved ones, and of eating good food. So how would I bring that into governing for most vulnerable communities? I mean, I think that teaches me to love people, right? And it teaches me to be surprised by people and be willing to stay in community with people who are part of our extended, you know, identity groups, Jewish, queer, whatever. We hold something in common, but also there's stuff we don't have in common, and there's stuff we disagree about, and we fight about over the dinner table. So I think that gives me a model for how to work with other people, meaning that we see the light in each other, we see the joy we can offer in community, in our similarities, and we also fight for one another's rights to be different.
Thank you, thank you. I'm just trying to collect these questions. Any more questions in the gallery?
Anybody have a pen?
Where are the cards?
Anybody have a pen?
Anyone else?
Yeah, I have pins. You make your pin.
Wait so long. What's so long to ask? I'm quiet. So you should say something.
I thought it was the last one.
I think.
You wanna get some people?
Yeah. Students, anybody? Card, you know what? Yeah, cards can.
She's my twin sister, my older twin sister.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what?
She told me how to use it.
You're a twin.
Anybody else need cards?
12. Stop.
Generally speaking. I have a couple of here. They take it very seriously.
So as those continue to write questions again, I'm going to do my best to try to get through all of them. But you know, I'm not going to lie, we probably not get through all of them. But I will do my best to ask.
You could share out at the end of this.
And I think that's a good thing. I can share these questions with the candidates, and then you all can post them on the website and things like that. You know, that's actually an idea I had when I was in the shower one day. So, yes, because I think about work in a relaxing environment. Okay, so I think you all can answer this question, and to try to be fair, let's try to give a minute response if we could, just so that we're able to get through as many questions as possible. Is that fair? So if your campaign proves unsuccessful, how will you continue to show up for our communities or in our communities? communities. So if your campaign proves unsuccessful, how will you show or continue to show up in our communities? And we can start with here and work our way down.
Sure. So I introduced myself as an assistant city attorney that works for the city of Columbus and has worked for the city of Columbus. If my campaign is successful, I can't do that because that's a conflict of interest. If it is not successful, I will remain a servant of the city of Columbus, as I have been for the better half of the last 7 years. And so it has been one of the great honors of my life to be able to work with the various departments of the city of Columbus, with the administration, with council members, to be able to assist individuals in their most vulnerable states and in moments of crises, to be able to walk through crises with individuals, to be able to provide creative solutions to our communities. I will continue to do that. It is something that I have enjoyed tremendously, and it is something that I expect to continue to do, even if my campaign is unsuccessful.
Thank you. Jesse?
Well, I believe that change, which is needed, is only accomplished by working together with others. And what I feel so privileged about is that in this campaign, I've gotten to work with hundreds of supporters who have pitched in and shown up and knocked some doors with us and talked to neighbors. And we're talking about some big ideas around fare free transit, universal pre-K, more deeply affordable housing. And I'd like to continue to find ways, even if not elected to city council, to organize with my neighbors who have shown up in this campaign, who think these are good ideas, to build what we need and to organize to get those ideas accomplished, even if I don't get elected. Because there's so much work to do, it's urgent here, and we need to continue to support our neighbors in getting what they need.
So I think part of this is that there's a level of opportunity here that we haven't been able to exercise in the past. As community and as community organizers, we're going to continue to show up. We're going to continue to lead neighborhoods. We're going to continue to serve others. We're going to continue to be with the band. I'm going to continue to do those things too. Because that is a great part of my life, is doing those things. I don't anticipate that service is going to change very much, because that's kind of how you live every day of your life, right? Like, you choose to live as a servant to others in ways that make sense for you. For me, it's showing up within the community, and when there's a need, people call, or I see it and I show up. There's something that happens that's urgent on the corner and people text message, and I just end up being there because that's how we show up for one another in community. That's not going to change whether I'm on council or off, because we're going to continue to do that. The question is that we've had frustration that we haven't had the representation that we wanted in this neighborhood and in our neighborhoods, and we have a chance to be able to select someone who is in your corner for you, who has been alongside you for a long period of time, doing the work with you. And so I think I understand it in a different kind of way, and I will represent that on city council.
Thank you. All right. So I tried to categorize these questions. Okay, so these questions are all in regards to some form of city resources. So I'm gonna try to answer them, try to ask them one question, or maybe two parts. So the question is, can you get the Near East Side a grocery store? Please. And then the question I think that really ties to this is, how would you utilize?
I'm so sorry.
So can you get the Near East Side grocery store, please? And how would you utilize city resources to make communities more self-reliant? For example, walkability grocery stores, locally owned businesses, and support. Let's start with Jesse.
And I'll up it to 2 minutes.
Well, the first question is a yes or no. But yes, yeah. She's the chair of this meeting. She has to say.
We could make it more than yes or no. Yes, let's get the Near East Side grocery store. I mean, look, I know others have been involved, deeply in neighborhood advocacy around issues like that. And it's what I'm hearing as we're knocking doors and talking to neighbors about, why is it that I live in a city where costs are rising so high and it's expensive to pay my rent and I can barely afford my car payment, and yet I don't have a grocery store in my neighborhood. I think that's a problem. I think that's something the city has to focus on. And one thing I'm interested in is looking at when we're developing and giving out a tax abatement to a company that says they're gonna bring in some jobs or says they're gonna provide some affordable housing. What is the community, is the community getting jobs and affordable housing? Do we know? Are we keeping track? Are we clawing back some money if they don't do what they said they're gonna do? I think we can do a better job of holding them accountable. And I think as a result of some of those negotiations, we can try to get more community resources like grocery stores with good, healthy, nutritious food in places that unfortunately don't have that at this moment.
Thank you. Ms. Curtis Susan.
Well, to my knowledge, you're looking at the only person who's been working on that for the last 2 years. So I've been working with the Bronzeville Food Co-op to bring food here to the Near East Side. So who is at that table is the Near East Area Commission, Public Health, City of Columbus, through the Department of Development, OSU, right? These partnerships, Bronzeville Growers, Bronzeville Neighborhood Association, and quite a few other neighbors. So you're looking at a person who knows that that's important and has been advocating for that for the last 2 years plus, because all that time that we were on the commission, we were advocating for this. Although technically we do have one on the Near East Side, which is the Kroger, which is in Franklin Park. Let's be clear, that is not Bexley. It's not really accessible for folks who live up in Sawyer-Trevitt, which is why we're really trying to work so hard to bring a food co-op to Bronzeville and have that be equitable food access for so many. And we know that that's important because you probably got a postcard, and I helped design that postcard. So that survey and all that work that we're doing collaboratively as a group, Willis Brown's at the table for that. There's quite a few people that you would know that are at that table because food is so important. And when we think about the development projects that have happened, many times we've had to go back and look at what did they promise and why did we not have it? Why weren't there computer kiosks at East Market? I asked, and we got them because we followed up on the agreements. Why is it that Legacy Point had things that weren't followed through in the different phases that they had in that project? We asked, we tried to follow through to make sure that the developer followed through with what they had promised. But it becomes this thing where we don't get paid for that as volunteers, right? All that 7 years of being on the commission, that's not work that I'm getting paid for. That was volunteer work. So showing up as your council member who will get paid, and that will be my job, I will be able to advocate for you, and I will rabble-rouse to make sure that we follow through with those agreements and those promises that they make to our neighborhoods.
Thank you. Ms. Ross.
Okay. Yes. Right. Yes, to a grocer in the Near East Side, and I've worked in so many communities where we have food deserts. So agree with Kate that food is an incredible need in our community, and the business model of grocers don't necessarily match the need of the community, right? They're looking for the biggest return on their investment, so they're looking for the most dense communities to make their home, and sometimes we don't have that, which is why dense communities is important because it drives economic growth, it drives resources to the community. So, which is why I support increased density so that resources can come, so that you can walk to your resource. You can choose whatever mode of transportation is available to get there, and building accessible transportation in those corridors of density is important. I've worked with markets a ton. Just recently, Livingston Avenue Area Commission got sick of some of the activity that they were seeing in markets. That's a food desert. And so they had enough votes to potentially vote that entire corridor dry, right? But then there were people who represented renters, and the renters said, I understand what the issues are, but sometimes that market is the only place I can get to get juice or to get milk. And so we came together as a community to think about best practice to mitigate some of that nuisance activity, but then also make that market productive in the right now for that community. So the markets agreed to provide fresh produce on their shelves, something that they had never done, right? The markets agreed to be contributing members of that community. And so I think those are also opportunities and ways that we can walk alongside that. Is there a capital budget that city council can promote to walk alongside those neighborhood activities? It's a participatory budget that we can put together where community members are able to say what they need from a capital improvement perspective, and we can bring that to the community.
All right, so I think I'm gonna hit the hammer on the head, the nail on the head, whatever the expression is of this question. Try to combine 3 questions, all right? But again, let's focus on this main question. So the state of Ohio is hostile at the moment, and Columbus is a city that seems to make good ideas that stall. So as a newcomer, how will you be a leader and execute on district priorities and issues like trash, yard waste, and recycling pickup, and issues of drugs and crime? And then we'll start with Ms. Carrie D'Souza.
Getting the hot seat on a lot of these here. You're gonna have to go first next time. All right, so.
Want me to go? I can go.
No, I got it.
Okay.
So, here we go. So I think part of that is that I am a server, right? I'm a servant to you. And so leadership looks different for different folks. I'm a collaborator and I'm a bridge builder. In my day job, I work for a large nonprofit and I work in collective impact. I serve Columbus City Schools and I bring a lot of people to the table because there is never enough money or capacity or time or people to do all the work that needs done in our communities to support schools. So I think I'm keenly able to be able to bring more people to the table to help serve that need. We know that trash pickup is sort of wonky right now. There's some things that could be done differently. Why do we have 2 apps? I'm not sure. It's because things are siloed and people aren't talking to one another. And that means that we're not necessarily spending our money most wisely. We're not looking at ways that we can work together to do more collaboration because the departments aren't talking. And so I think that there's opportunities for us to do more bridge building and bring people together at the same table so we can do work more effectively because, oh, you're designing an app. Well, I already have an app. Can we share the time together and can I put some money in your pot from my budget to add this extra feature on the app so we can use the app that you have already that's really great or whatever. We can do that better because we're working collaboratively together, and that's also being fiscally responsible to all of us who put money into the tax kitty for this. So I think that that's really where we need to start thinking about how do we build more bridges? How do we bring community leaders in? How do we bring churches in for conversation? How do we, because they're landowners, how do we bring folks to come in from community groups to do work together so we can do this better? How do we service community gardens to make sure that they have refuse pickup because they're feeding people, right? We can do more with what we have. We just need to be thinking about it in a more collaborative way. And I think that we need to be bridge building and bringing people to the table to have the conversations. We have subject matter experts. You're all in this room. Let's talk.
Oh, I was gonna loop around.
Loop around.
Well,
Okay, we're talking trash and we're talking drugs.
yeah. I can read the question. So the state of Ohio is hostile at the moment. Columbus is a city that seems to have good ideas that stall. As a newcomer, how will you be a leader and execute on district priorities and issues like trash, yard waste, and recycling pickup, and address issues of drugs and crime?
Trash, yard waste, recycling that's a city issue, period. I don't know that we need the state to be able to handle that, and I very much agree with Kate, and we operate in silos. It's human nature to get very focused and hyper-focused on things that you are an expert on, right? And so making sure that we are expanding our thought process to include everybody who could be a stakeholder, right? Code enforcement is often a stakeholder when we're looking at trash pickup. The Department of Refuse right now is severely understaffed. Right, and so when you're calling the Department of Refuse to have someone come and maybe investigate illegal dumping in your community, there's not enough people to be able to respond timely, right? There are trail cameras that are available at the Department of Refuse, right? That could help. There are not enough trail cameras to give to every alley that's struggling with illegal dumping. So we need to think about what that looks like. How do you right size that budget so that you can get the services that you pay for? and with your taxes, agreed. Drugs and crime, also a safety issue. You're a home rule city, home rule state. City of Columbus can do that largely without the state. There are a few things that the state does that makes it difficult, right? Gun ownership, common sense gun reform, things like that we need to be advocates for. But we need to know our state partners, right? We need to make sure we're talking to Rep. Gerald's, this district, right? We need to make sure we're talking to Senator Craig, to the folks who can help advocate at that level. We have to have those relationships to be able to communicate back and forth with folks to get stuff done.
Jesse, you need me to state the question again?
I think I got it.
Okay. I got you.
I mean, there are about 5 questions.
Yeah, I'm just trying to
He
get
said he was combining three.
Yeah,
I don't know, it's my head. But, I mean, okay, so maybe I'll take the first part of that, which was about hostile state house and about trying to get things done in Columbus and seeming to run into roadblocks. You know, I think that one thing I'd like to see, and I think this is a conversation about what we need to change, is, you know, I think we need to talk about leadership in the city and talk about, you know, why is it that things are not getting done in the way, or why is it that agencies are maybe not communicating to one another? When I get on city council, I want to dig into that and ask some questions. Columbus City Council has an oversight role. It appropriates money to the executive branch of the mayor's office. And it also has a role to make sure those dollars are spent right. And so when we're running into roadblocks and people are not able to get their trash picked up and people are making 2 apps instead of 1, you know, I think that has to do with the fact that maybe we have a city council that could do a better job of standing up and asking some hard questions of folks in the mayor's office sometimes about why is it that things are working the way they are, and why is it that that's not working for folks in District 7. So I'd like to take that on as council member.
Thank you. All right, I know we said 8 o'clock, but how y'all feel about 8:30? 8:30, 8:30, it's like give me 20 minutes. At least this will be the only forum we've been to
Said no, thank you.
where we ask every question, right?
Thank you for coming.
Thanks for coming.
Right. So it's really two more sets of questions left. These questions are directly for you, Ms. Ross. So why did you move to Columbus just days before the deadline to run? How long did you drive on a suspended license?
I moved into Columbus to better position myself to be able to serve the residents of the city of Columbus. Again, I'm a native of Columbus. I was born here, have deep roots in District 7. I consider this to be an opportunity to give back to the community that raised me. I drove on a suspended license because I was unaware that it was suspended at the time. After addressing it immediately, it was brought to my attention. Certainly remembered that there was a ticket that I had not paid. It is now paid. License is now back reinstated. Appreciate the question. I think it's a fair question. And I think being accountable to residents is important. So thank you.
All right. Okay. I'll save this as the last question. This will be my. You got one more question for the last question. Okay. How? I'm trying to make this a 2-part, but it's really possible. So.
Good job, Ethan. You're trying.
Just do your thing.
You're doing great.
2 and 1.
We got 3 questions. All right.
That's okay. Sometimes 3 is better than 1 that has like
One big jumbo question, right? I think this question has kind of been answered already. So let's just say a minute for this question, and this next question be a minute too. So how does the position of city council member change the community work you are already doing? And Jesse, we can start with you.
Okay. Well, currently, I think of my job as community work in the sense that I'm providing legal services to low-income immigrants in Central Ohio who are trying to stay in legal status, obtain work authorization, get legal status, what have you. And, you know, I think as council member, I hope to find ways to continue to do some of that work because I, you know, care about the practice of law. It's something I like to do. And it's something that gives back to the community. So in that sense, I don't think it changed that much.
That was my question, so I just want to clarify, like, so why would you want to be on city council that's not gonna change, like, what you're already doing? You know, it's a good question.
I see.
Like, and for you, you're already like in public office,
Yeah.
so why
Yeah.
pursue another office?
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Do you wanna answer that?
Sure, I'll
And then
share
I
a
can
little more.
answer.
I'll share a little more. Thanks for explaining. Yeah, I mean, I think that as I work on the individual case level, you know, I work with people who are sort of immigrants or people, you know, previously I did this housing representation, people navigating these complicated systems, trying to stay housed, trying to maintain their housing voucher. And through that, you get to see how a city works and how it treats some of its people most vulnerable. And, you know, it's a little bit, sometimes doing legal services feels like an emergency room, like we're triaging, like we're trying to patch something back together to send them on their way such that a family can stay housed and go to work and go to school the next day. But sadly and unfortunately, then I see those folks come back in with another problem or a similar problem returning. So I'm interested in running for city council and getting on there and making bigger impact so that I can relieve some of the stressors on my clients' lives and on the lives of folks across the city. Because I think it's not right what people go through, and I think our city can work better for them.
Jesse and I are lawyers, so the law provides parameters, right? Oftentimes, when I get involved, in fact, folks are in crisis mode because we have to be reactive as the nature of the law. Like something has to happen, and then we can come in to enforce and do something about what has already happened. There are a ton of things and issues that I see that are in crisis mode that I think could have been handled a lot earlier in the process. For example, we have an owner-occupied initiative, and that's a docket that I manage, and that is for seniors who find themselves hit with a code violation that they can't fix. By the time it gets to me, right, a roof issue that maybe could have been handled 2 years ago has now caused so much damage in the interior of that senior's home that they might be displaced. Those resources can easily be moved upstream. We can think about ways to move those resources upstream. So I am sometimes caught within the boundaries of the work that I can do legally as a lawyer. And so thinking about what it looks like to build the capacity of programs that I've started that are doing well, right? To make sure that we're moving resources upstream so a senior doesn't have to wait to get a lawsuit filed against them in order to have access to resources, right? To pull on low-hanging fruit so that we can bring the Department of Technology in and say, hey, these are some things that we're not seeing, right? That are causing more harm to our communities than helping. How can we change that? That is why I'm running.
So for me, I worked in program management for a long time, right? And that if you look at my resume, you'll see it's children's services, it's urban league, right? It's working for COVA and for Job and Family Services and having done benefits determinations for so many families that came through at JFS. And I was in a super unit, so we were doing childcare. When I started, we were doing a DOS prom system for doing like childcare, and we were doing refugee cash assistance and TANF cash and food assistance and Medicaid. And these are all things that these are services that people really need when they are trying to get started. And I understand that because I've lived that life. But also, it was too low. It was too low to really fix problems. And so as my job's elevated to the point where now I do like a systems level work where it's collective impact, you're bringing bigger people together, Columbus City Schools, Department of Medicaid, like the organization that I work for can bring people to the table and you can actually navigate some of these silos because you're having people who actually make decisions talk, right? And so we can break the silos down and we can actually get work done. And so, but that bridge building, and it has helped because I've lived here for so long and I've worked here for so long in this community through all those other program manager, case manager type jobs, that we have connections within the community. But part of it has also been this frustration that we hit this level where we just can't get things done, right? We got things to the point with even the commission, where we bring it to city council and we would tell them really valid reasons why this is a safety concern, it's edge to edge, and it's too close to the street, and it would just pass anyway. We wouldn't even get our district vote. And so that is why I'm running as an independent, so I can be your voice, and so we can start activating on that and build those bridges, because I have practiced with that, because I've worked in the community, and I have a degree from OSU, it's a humanities degree, but I think that really shows that I know how to work with people. And so that experience, I think, will really help, because it will help us begin to execute on the things that we really have already had a lot of frustration about, and we have not had anybody advocating for us downtown. And so that's what I'm here to be accountable to.
Thank you. All right, 2 last questions. Okay, so our homeschool is failing 3% math proficiency, 6% reading proficiency. The closest school that isn't failing is $30,000 a year. What will you do for more quality and affordable education?
I'll go. Can I go?
Yes, please.
Dr. Rutherford. So I've been working in this space with education, and what I can tell you is that yes, there are some failure points, and yes, the schools are struggling because they need more people to show up. And so how do we show up for schools, right? How do we as community members go to the school and actually show up for them, right? Trevitt Elementary dug themselves out of academic emergency without a literacy coach. They did that because they care that much about the kids. They care that much about the kids that they show up every day, and they're led by the amazing Dr. Bates. And if you've never met her, she's dynamic and amazing, and she does great things for our community, and she's doing great things for the Sawyer Trevitt community. And so we need to make sure that we are supporting people like that who support our kids. So does Columbus City's like, how can we do that? We can monitor the tax abatements that we're giving away to people, and we can get better return on our investment with those tax abatements, so that if we're going to give away a tax abatement that cuts away funding from our schools, that the city actually gets something back for that, that's affordable housing, that actually returns on its investment for us, right? And otherwise, we're not giving away those kinds of things. It's a tool to be used carefully. And so we can do better by our schools, and that is one way we can pitch in with that.
Yes, I agree. About tax abatements, about monitoring what we're doing with that and how it's working, because that is us, mortgaging our kids' future, and we can't do that. That's wrong. I'm really concerned about Columbus City schools and about the crisis schools are under right now. Public education is under with defunding from the state level. I haven't seen our city council stand up and say loud enough, we support Columbus City schools and public education. I'd like to see that. I'd also like to see, us as a city invest in programs that take some of the burden off of the school system and the teachers and staff and faculty showing up to do such a hard job every day. So that's why I'm looking hard at how do we get towards universal pre-K and then additionally childcare, so that kids are ready for the school day. I'd like to see us look at investing in additional support for kids to access tutoring at rec centers outside the school day. And then I think we need to keep on partnering on programs that help support the well-being of kids in CCS, who so many are experiencing different kinds of trauma that gets in the way of them being successful. So let's look at a city at restorative practices, which are shown to be, scientifically, evidently proven to be effective at helping kids deal with trauma. We could incorporate that into every part of the city and say, when a kid interacts with the City of Columbus, they're to interact with an agency that's trained in restorative practices, such that we can start to undo the trauma folks are feeling and help them be more successful as CCS.
Agreed. I think the city's role is walking alongside our students. And so the students can spend a certain amount of hours in a day at a school, but they oftentimes have to return home to whatever state their home life is in. And so supporting the family nucleus of the student from a resource provision perspective is important and something the city can do literally right away. I think that different regions of our city do better because of people. And when you're dependent on someone's personality to do well, that means the system itself is broken. And so we don't ask enough questions to our CCS board. I think as a city, we've largely just said that CCS, that's the board's responsibility. I think we can get in the weeds a little bit. I think we can start asking these questions, figuring out what the student needs and providing that holistic support, particularly for the families, because that's the direct responsibility of the city and something that we can do and do more effectively.
Thank you. Final question. What is your why, and how will you protect all homeowners, even those who are absent? So what is your why, and how will you protect all homeowners, even those who are absent? And
Can you explain?
Absent or absentee landlords, homeowners, or?
No. Okay, so that was my question. So earlier some of you talked about property owners who leave their homes abandoned.
Oh.
Okay? Read the question again. So coming from that perspective, there's two separate questions. One, what is your why? I want to know why. Why now? Why whatever? You kind of answered it, but I'm looking for something specific. I need to hear something, the sound I'm trying to hear. And then the second part of the question is a basic respect thing, because I didn't hear the respect. I almost heard a loathing in a way of blaming and not being receptive or understanding of that absent homeowner whose home is not being lived in currently, but they're trying to keep up with their property the best way they can. But so that's what my question is. How are you going to help them?
I'll start if you don't mind. My why is the audacity to just care for people. My entire life, I have lived in community with folks of all different creed, all different colors, and caring for folks, particularly our most vulnerable, is what invigorates my passion to serve and to continue in service. I think that we as a city, in comparison to other cities, when you think about crises like Colonial Village and Sawyer Towers, and literally being boots on the ground and helping folks take their items out of their homes in the middle of a winter storm. Doing that, one, allows me to appreciate the resiliency of our community, but two, makes me so much more passionate about the things that we need to do to make sure resources are reaching everybody. And the relationships that I built, not only with the residents of that community, but with all of the other resource providers that came together in crisis, right? The excitement about moving that towards systems is what I'm running for. I work every day with absentee property owners. One, the law provides protections for property owners, right? When you think about pursuit of life, liberty, ownership of property, that's a big deal. So there's some constitutional protections that legally we have to work through every time we're dealing with a property owner, whether or not they're here or absent. Thinking about over enforcement and what that does to communities. Oftentimes it harms communities, right? When you're not thinking about how you can work with a property owner to get them into compliance, right? To get them to a place where they can hold on to a piece of property that was an investment maybe for them. And maybe created a level of wealth or equity that they need in their homes. I think we can do that. I think there's a difference between a property owner that needs help to get into compliance and a property owner that never intended to do right by a property, right? And I think you have to have that understanding, and I think you hold accountable the people who deserve to be held accountable, and you help the ones that need the help. I do that every day. I do it every day, and I will continue to do that.
Okay. I know we're nearing time, but I want to tell you, you asked about why, and I want to tell you briefly, if I can, about my grandpa. My grandpa Amos, we mentioned that I was Jewish. He was born in Austria, and he was born in 1921, and he escaped with his parents as the Nazis came in and occupied his country. And I didn't know that much about his story and about the story of family members that were lost in that time. But I did see in him this, wild kind of curiosity and drive to build something of his life in a different country. And when I go and do my work representing immigrants who have traveled thousands of miles to come to Columbus, to make Columbus their home, I think to myself about him and about what can we do as a city to make everyone have this be a place that can be a successful place for them to live, to build an amazing family, to be creative, to organize with their neighbors, to make their community better. That's what he did. That's what he was able to do in a rented apartment that he lived in till he died because he was able to. And I think let's find ways to keep communities in Columbus stable enough to be able to do that here. So I think that's a why. I want to share that. In terms of absentee property owners who are having trouble keeping up their properties, I don't have a full answer to your question. I think one answer is to think about costs and think about what's happening right now with property taxes and ask what can we as a city do to reduce some of that burden. There's only so much, but I know that in some other communities in Cuyahoga County, in Cincinnati, they've created property tax assistance programs that provide limited sort of one-time financial relief to low-income seniors who are having trouble paying their property taxes, which may be one reason that they're having trouble keeping up their properties, and as well as some financial counseling and resources like that. I know this is a program that Columbus could implement, that some members of council have looked at. If I get onto city council, I'd like to push that conversation forward because that issue about affordability for seniors is a #1 issue that I see when I talk to people every day talking about this campaign.
So I think part of it comes back to in this area, we've had a lot of speculating. We've had a lot of private equity firms that are purchasing properties and are waiting on them. We've had properties that have been sitting on the corners and they've been torn down because it's been demolition through dereliction. And we've lost a lot of historic properties here on the Near East Side in particular because of some of those behaviors. And so it doesn't serve the rich history of the neighborhood, which of course, 3 or 4 generations deep in your family, it doesn't honor that time that people put into those homes because it also prevented people from being able to live in them in that time frame because they're being held by companies that are just hanging on to them. And they're waiting for many times what it seems to be that the property value is going to go up. And when they have had it where it becomes too decrepit to stay up, they have no problem with them just bulldozing whatever historic property was on there so that they can have a clean slate and they can build whatever they want. And that doesn't fix our housing crisis. It doesn't help the people who've been trying to live around it, and it doesn't honor the history of our neighborhood. And so to that, this isn't having code being weaponized for elders. That's not the intent. But it is really to try to find some better solutions to the housing issues that we do have and to try to address how do we get properties so that they are in better shape, so that they are occupied? Is it a family that's struggling with probate court? Is it an elder who's in a nursing home and they're not able to be in the home? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a much bigger problem. And with properties that have sat for a significant amount of time not being tended to. And we have entities who have sat on properties for a long period of time and that has drawn a lot of ire from the neighborhood. We won't call them all out in this meeting. But with that, also, that is my why, right? Because we want to make sure that we have advocacy downtown. We want to make sure that we have people to have a voice when you are having a concern. The endless calls to 311 become your problem to try to chase down because you put it in and the ticket goes. Well, where's the status of the ticket, right? Like, what is actually happening? Where's the accountability for that? Is it that we have 2 apps and we didn't need it? How do we do that? Because I want to be able to serve and make things more effective for you so you actually can get a hold of somebody, a live person, who will actually help solve the problem. So that is.
Thank you. Let's please give it a round. On behalf of the New York Area Commission, I want to thank you three for taking some time out of your very busy schedules to have a discussion with us tonight. I know it's a long one, but thank you again. If you are so free, please join us again. And to all of the community that came out tonight, thank you all so much for coming. We'll be back here next Thursday for our general business meeting. Madam Chair, you close us out.
This concludes our community engagement meeting for April.
Great job.
That's wonderful.
Downtown's okay.
Well, yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I can't, you guys.